Hey everybody, it's May 25th. Welcome to Tech Tuesday. Today I'm going to be talking about the latest in broadband news. I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. I'm Rick Uzi here at Zquorum, and today I'm going to be talking about the latest broadband news, some news that's curated for broadband providers. So I read all this stuff. I go through it and I kind of curate, put it together so that you don't have to. So let's get started. Let's see what's happening today and the last few days. So this is encouraging. So there's been 1 million households that have signed up for the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program in the first week. And this is a program that was part of a bill that is helping to provide subsidies, discounts basically for people that have had a difficult time, that are having a hard time paying for broadband. This all came out from the pandemic. So this is a temporary program. We don't know what's going to happen permanently with this, but it is something that service providers were able to sign up for, and then subscribers could sign up if their service provider was participating. So it says here more than 1 million households have signed up. The program, which will provide $3.2 billion in discounts, supports families with as much as $50 or $75 in qualifying tribal lands for connectivity, and as much as a $100 reduction in the cost of a laptop, desktop, or tablet if the consumer contributes between $10 and $50 of the purchase price. So this is again to help low-income families right now, but I think also was aimed at those that had been really impacted by the pandemic, maybe lost their jobs, didn't have good broadband at home or had to drop that. So being a temporary program, we'll have to see what happens going forward. But with Biden's broadband infrastructure plan, one of the things that he wanted to kind of attack with that was the affordability of broadband without having to rely on subsidies. So there's questions as to what all that means. It says more than 900 broadband providers are in the program now. And for households to qualify, they need to be part of SNAP, Medicaid, Lifeline, or reduced price school meals. Also, providers existing COVID-19 relief programs, those who have received a Pell Grant this year, or low-income households who suffered a large reduction in income due to job loss or furlough since February 29, 2020, which often would be related to COVID. So that's good news there. This shows you kind of the impact that it can have. This was a study done or research done by a company that does some bill pay things. They say the United States of bill pay, the average U.S. household spends $1,141 per year on cable and internet bills. So that's both together, I guess, cable and broadband. And they have a little breakdown here where it shows that, again, that impact of that emergency broadband benefit. So they're saying they've come up with the average household spend per month on cable and internet as $116. And then if you adjust that with the $50 emergency broadband benefit, that comes down to $66, and that's a 43% savings. And there was some other interesting data that they had in here just on the market. The total market size is $147 billion spent this year on broadband and internet. Again, you've got this $116 per month or $1,392 spent per year, average monthly and annual. Percent of annual income, cable and internet bills amount to 2% of consumers' income per year. And then you can see some of the these are the states with the highest cable internet bills. You've got Alaska. That's not too surprising because not just rural in Alaska, but really hard territory. You've got rocky, permafrost, all kinds of issues, and very remote areas. So $148 per month average there. And then you see this here, the yearly amounts and the percent of the household bill with that. Down to New Jersey, still in the high-end tier at $130. And then some of your highest cost, what is this? This was states with the highest cable internet bills. These are the metro areas with the highest internet bills. So you got Northeast here, New York, Boston, and then you got St. Louis, Los Angeles, Kansas City, not surprising. Again, these are northeastern states. And when you looked at the lowest, they don't have it here. I think I have it, I think I can pull it up here. The lowest states, let me see if I can find that. I was looking at the, actually, is that, you can't see that, can you? No, I need to share that separately so you can't see it. But I'll just read it off here. So the least expensive states were Nebraska, Utah, New Mexico, Idaho, South Dakota. So again, kind of surprising. You'd think that in the metro areas it would be the least expensive due to competition, and you've got high density, whereas these states where it's the least expensive, you don't tend to see as high a density, and again, there may be less competition because of that as well. This is something that the GOP has just unveiled, a $20 billion broadband infrastructure bill, and I'm not sure how this relates to the $65 billion bill that they counter-proposed recently, because that one still seems to be in play. In fact, it's being looked at seriously by the administration. But this says it targets money to unserved areas and ties it to streamlined permitting. Streamlined permitting, I should say, not permitting, permitting. In other words, you're trying to get permits. So it provides $23 billion in targeted infrastructure deployment funds to be overseen by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the NTIA, rather than the FCC. Usually this kind of stuff goes to the FCC. Other programs like the ones that go through the Department of Agriculture for rural, but so here it says $20 billion over 5 years would go to broadband build-outs, plus another $3 billion for rural wireless infrastructure. And you can see where the GOP is trying to point people in the direction of and to counter some of the things that were in the Biden proposal, which was very brief, not much details, but says the money would be handed out by the NTIA in the form of grants using the Better Broadband Availability Maps that Congress, the Broadband Data Act, is mandated to come up with. So that map still needs to be defined. They want to get better maps before they want to start handing out lots of money. And the money would go to partnerships between industry and government, so long as the government side of the equation had streamlined their permitting process, the money goes to broadband and not red tape. So that's one thing they want to make sure, is that it's not going to red tape. Then here you can see again the focus, what they're trying to focus on. The money would be targeted to rural and unserved areas, with the goal being to spur deployment. And then I'm assuming they mean without duplicative and wasteful overbuilding. They don't say that without in there, but I think that's what they're trying to say. In other words, they are saying it would be okay to target this money in areas, even if you're using a partnership with a government, as long as you're not doing wasteful overbuilding. In other words, if there's already good service there, let's not spend money to put additional service where we already have good service. The Biden plan funds municipal networks and makes price and competition part of the calculus for where broadband is considered to be available. So the point here is that competition should be secondary. If you're going to put these funds somewhere, it needs to be where there's not broadband already. By relying on a light touch regulatory environment and targeted investments rather than cumbersome government-run networks, we will ensure reliable, affordable access for the communities who need it most. So they're trying to say that let's do this through partnerships with private companies, and could be municipalities getting together to do this. Let's not just fund it for municipalities, and let's not do it if there's a private operator already providing good service in that particular municipal area. The time may have arrived for big tech to pay up for telecom. So a couple weeks ago, I did a Tech Tuesday with Jimmy Todd from Next Tech. We talked about how there's a burden on rural internet providers as far as the increase in demand for bandwidth, and a lot of this comes from streaming. So a lot of this is being driven by the over-the-top video streamers that they're seeing. So, in the conversation I had with Jimmy, it was pretty clear that if you're a rural provider, that cost is really significant. I think at one point he was saying that it was almost half, that they were almost bearing half the cost of a video subscription. So if a subscriber is paying, let's say, $10 a month for over-the-top video streaming, that the service provider is footing about half of that. And that's just because of the fact that the Netflix or Disney Plus or whoever is not paying anything towards that bandwidth that's being used on their network. So this is kind of a similar idea. It says big tech has been enjoying a free ride on our internet infrastructure while skipping out on the billions of dollars in costs needed to maintain and build that network, wrote Republican FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr this week. So this is talking about just in general. So this could be talking about just YouTube generally, not YouTube TV maybe, Facebook, any of these big tech companies that are using lots of bandwidth, but they're not helping to fund the network that their content travels over. He said that companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google should help fund the construction of broadband networks in rural areas because they've been making record profits off the use of those networks. Congress should enact legislation excuse me, that ensures big tech contributes an equitable amount. And again, in that conversation that I had with Jimmy Todd a couple weeks ago, we talked about a bill. It's HR 2929, and that was aimed at streaming, but also possibly companies like this footing some of that bill somehow. So the first part of that, there was another bill that has to go through first that would help define the problem by getting all of the facts on how this is impacting rural networks, and then hopefully that other bill could go through. But what this is looking at is doing it through universal service funds, and it could be that that's the way HR 2929 would approach it as well. Carr's new proposal arrived just days after the Biden White House said that it's willing to accept a Republican proposal to spend $65 billion instead of Biden's initial $100 billion to construct broadband services in unserved areas. So that was the counter proposal prior to this $20 billion I was just talking about that the Republicans came up with. While Democrats and Republicans appear to have reached an agreement on the amount of money they're willing to spend on crossing the digital divide, they still haven't agreed on how to finance all that spending. So it looks like the administration has come down from their 100 to the 65 that the Republicans have proposed, but now they need to fight over or negotiate over how they're going to get that paid for. As noted by the New York Times, Biden wants to raise taxes on corporations to fund the effort, which Republicans oppose. Meantime, Republicans want to raise user fees like the gas tax, which the president opposes. So taxes on corporations, I mentioned this recently. Taxes on corporations sounds really good to some people because they think, well, then I don't have to pay the taxes. But as I mentioned last time, corporations don't pay taxes. People pay taxes. And those corporations, when they get taxed like this, they're going to pass it on to the rest of us, the consumers, either through higher prices, through less dividends, or let's say in your 401k. You might not think you're in the stock market, but you have a 401k you are, or to their employees, fewer raises, lower raises, those kinds of things. Those costs are going to be passed on. Nobody writes a check and doesn't then pass that on to somebody else. Of course, user fees, gas taxes, those kinds of things would also be passed on to consumers. So in either case, consumers are going to be paying for that. Thus, the notion of requiring internet companies to pay into the USF would appear to provide a happy compromise. So what they're saying there is, and this would be okay, would be if these tech companies then go ahead and pay into the USF, then that can take away some of this need to fund it through these other ways. Now, if it's companies like Google and Facebook, those are free to consumers, so we don't have to pay for those. They're not really free, right? Because you are their customer, you are their product, because it's your information that they're gathering and your information that they're selling, generally in an aggregated way. But because of that, they provide the service for free. So it's not like Facebook is going to be able to raise their prices, or Google's going to be able to raise the prices for their search engine. Now, streaming companies, if they are also involved in this, and they are the ones that are really using these networks, they might raise their prices. So if it did come up that streaming companies had to contribute to the USF, and you're paying $15 a month to Netflix, let's say, for your Netflix account, they might throw $1 on there for a USF fee, kind of like you see on your phone bill today. So it could be that that does hit consumers that way. So again, this would be maybe a happy compromise. There's bipartisan support there, which is interesting. It's rare to find bipartisan support in Washington. Analyst Roger Ettner of Recon Analytics told me it would solve the quagmire that we currently have in Congress. And yes, there is a quagmire. So that's pretty interesting to see if this could get any momentum here to have these big tech companies and maybe the streamers start paying for some of these USF, or contribute to that, which would then help expand broadband and help. Really, again, USF is meant for rural areas, so it would really help solve some of that problem with rural broadband and getting broadband into those unserved areas, or what we call high-cost areas, because it's expensive to provide there. This is funny. So Biden, 25 megabits broadband is fine, I guess. So, in the Biden infrastructure plan, it talks about future-proofed broadband. A lot of people interpret that as gigabit broadband, and in the most recent RDOF auction that we did, in the RDOF auction, it was 1 gigabyte was definitely weighted in favor of people providing that kind of service. So says here, in unveiling his massive infrastructure spending proposal, that would be the $2 trillion plus, where $100 billion was originally broadband, now maybe that's down to $65 billion. Many saw that phrase of future-proof as shorthand for 1 gigabit per second. However, the Biden administration new guidelines for federal spending on broadband offers plenty of wiggle room around that number. Biden's Treasury and Commerce departments recently suggested that broadband networks in the U.S. provide at least 100 megabits download speeds and 20 megabits upload speeds. But their rules also consider households to be unserved generally if they can't get at least 25 megabits down and 3 megabits per second up. So that's been, for the last couple of years, that's been the definition of broadband, 25 down, 3 up. And it doesn't sound like that's going to change for a couple of different reasons. So despite the 1 gigabit goal, they're still going to say that people have broadband if they can get at least 25 megabits per second down and 3 up. This was financial analysts at New Street Research. Such advice is a clear signal that the Treasury generally wants to avoid allocating funds to projects that would constitute overbuilding. So again, they don't want to necessarily overbuild an area that already has good broadband. So if you've already got 25 or even 100, let's say 100 megabits per second, there's no reason to go in there with a gig if people are doing okay with 100. Telecom industry executives in general have been worrying over Biden's proposal to future-proof broadband. The logical conclusion of that line of thinking would render vast portions of the U.S. telecom industry as obsolete and in need of replacing. After all, most cable, copper, and wireless networks can't provide speeds anywhere near 1 gigabit per second. So yeah, if they change the definition of broadband, or they say suddenly everybody's got to have a gig, then suddenly it's like nobody has broadband anymore. Not nobody, but you reduce the number of people that have broadband. And like it says, it kind of renders it as obsolete just by a definition change. The guidelines suggest that at least the Treasury and Commerce departments are not supportive of providing federal funding to those areas served by advanced cable networks but not served by fiber. So in other words, if there's already a cable operator in there maybe providing 100 megabits or 300 megabits per second down, they don't necessarily think that a fiber provider needs to go in and put in a gig. And of course, a DOCSIS provider could go to DOCSIS 3.1 and 4.0 and provide a gig as well. We think such guidelines, by effectively discouraging funding of what investors think of as overbuilding, support what we refer to as the bull case. What's the New Street bull case? That's the broadband provisions of the Biden infrastructure bill do not result in either overbuilding or price regulation, according to the analysts. And that's the other concern that broadband operators have, is that the administration is going to come out and say, you need to have a minimum price tier for your customers. It needs to be this price, kind of like what they did in New York, which is being challenged right now, where they have a $15 tier, which is at like 25 megabits per second. But ISPs in New York have been told that they've got to offer that. That's an unfunded mandate, $15 per month to anybody that qualifies for a low-income service. Some in the industry have argued that there's little chance the Biden administration will raise the definition of broadband above the 25 megabit per second minimum. After all, doing so would reduce the number of people the administration can count as accessing broadband speeds, and few politicians will want to approve rules that will result in an overall reduction in the number of Americans with broadband. Instead, they likely rather oversee an increase in the number of Americans with broadband during their tenure. So yeah, that makes sense. If you were to change the definition of broadband, then suddenly on your watch, you suddenly reduce the number of people that have broadband, not physically, but basically by the change of that definition. Bandwidth demand forecasts. 300 megabits per second will be enough for most households to 2031. So again, talking about a gig broadband and future-proof, and everybody needs a gigabit right now. This particular analyst said that 300 megabits should probably be good for quite a while. The research firm's bandwidth demand forecast calls for most households to need no more than 300 megabits per second over the next 10 years. Close examination reveals that the applications usually cited as drivers of bandwidth growth are not as bandwidth intensive as some believe. While downstream bandwidth demand will continue to increase, according to the researchers, the rate of increase will slow from 34% annual growth in 2018 to 6% in 2030. And you could see where there would be some reason for that, because we've had over the last several years a big increase in the number of people that are streaming video. More cord cutting, more people that are adding to their, even if they didn't cut the cord, they're watching more Netflix, watching more Disney Plus. So you could see why there would be a big spike, and now as that starts to level off, you would expect the bandwidth use to level off. And they're talking a little bit about some of these other things that you would think would drive a lot of bandwidth that maybe don't as much as we would expect. For example, they say this forecast is based on several assumptions, including the fact that streaming video adapts to match available capacity. That's a good thing and a bad thing. As I refer back to Jimmy Todd in that discussion. One of the things that we were talking about was the fact that as he was increasing bandwidth on his network, these adaptive rate bandwidth kinds of features in Netflix and others will then suddenly eat all of that bandwidth. So as you give people more, then immediately gets eaten up by these streaming services that can adapt and increase the bandwidth. But what they're saying here is that if you've got 300 megabits per second, these services will adapt to that, and you'll get a good quality service. Video encoding innovations tend to offset the impact of higher display resolution. So as we go to 4K and whatnot, maybe the encoding gets better, so it doesn't have the impact that it would today if you did it. If 3 or 4 years from now you might have better encoding that kind of negates that. 4K streaming needs only modestly higher speeds than HD, which I was not aware of. I thought it was significant. 8K video streaming will likely be a niche market. That's probably true. I just now got a 4K TV recently, so I can't imagine upgrading to 8K anytime soon. So I think it's going to be a while before 8K takes hold. And it says will be a niche market anyway. Consumer adoption of augmented reality and virtual reality will be slow. I think that's probably true. Console gameplay requires low latency rather than high speeds. And the effect of higher speeds on reducing latency is no longer significant. And that's true too. A lot of times these games are just transmitting telemetry information, and it's really more important that your connection have low latency so that when you're shooting at somebody and they're shooting at you, you can hit them first, versus needing to have really high amounts of bandwidth. And it says even streaming gameplay looks to the network like HD or UHD video. And then most smart home devices consume negligible bandwidth, and cloud-connected smart home video devices do not require very high bandwidth. I guess that's possibly true, although I know my Nest cameras are eating up gigs of data daily, I believe. So for most households, 100 to 300 broadband service is adequate, the report states. We see little evidence to suggest this will change anytime in the next 10 years. And he notes that this Nielsen's law has accurately predicted the data rate increases from the highest available broadband service tier for cable consumers, growing at 50% per year. So he's saying that's the law, and it's kind of followed that. It says, according to conventional wisdom, this will continue with no end in sight, the author writes in his report, but conventional wisdom appears to be wrong. So he's going counter to that now and saying that's going to slow down quite a bit. FTC sues Frontier for misleading consumers about its DSL speeds. So here we have a story about speeds being basically people being told they would get faster than they're getting. So the FTC claims Frontier violated various state and federal laws by advertising and signing consumers up for DSL speeds it knew it couldn't provide. It also accuses Frontier of overcharging consumers, billing them for a higher speed service than they actually received. Of course, Frontier denied that. They hit back in a statement saying it was without merit, and they promised to mount a vigorous defense. They called it baseless allegations, and they insisted its DSL speeds were clearly and accurately articulated. The operator has around 3 million internet subscribers across the U.S., with approximately 1.3 million of these served by its copper-based residential DSL service. So you can see the issue that they have, and this has been something that's been known about Frontier. They were just come out of bankruptcy fairly recently. They were really trying to go hard into fiber. They bid quite a bit on RDOF, so they're going to be using those funds to roll out fiber in their service areas. But you can see here that they were kind of behind the curve, having so many DSL customers comparative to maybe some other phone companies. The FTC argues, indeed, in numerous instances, the speeds provisioned and provided to consumers corresponded with slower and often less expensive tiers of DSL service offered by Frontier. The FTC said it received thousands of consumer complaints about Frontier's practices since January 2015. And others are jumping on the bandwagon. Attorney generals of Arizona, Indiana, Michigan, North Carolina, and Wisconsin joined the complaint, along with the cities of Los Angeles and Riverside counties in California. And if I'm sure there are complaints from customers a lot about the speeds that they're getting from every single provider. For one thing, a lot of times they'll run a speed test and they're running it over their wireless network. So it's not even the internet provider's bad speed. It's the fact that they're maybe running it from a place where it's not a good, they're not getting a connection within a house on their home network. And it's going to vary anyway. So even on cable networks, if people run speeds, if they're told they have a, I don't know, let's say they're told they have a 300 megabit per second plan, and they run that, it might be not 300 megabits per second. It might be 250, 200 at times. It depends on how busy the network is. So, but it looks like Frontier hit the threshold on the complaints there, and the FTC is looking at fining them, or filing a lawsuit, excuse me. FCC proposes new stir-shaken date for possible robocall facilitators. So stir-shaken, I did a Tech Tuesday. A lot of this is going to sound, you're going to be like, what is this? So I did a Tech Tuesday on this, and I'll go ahead and do a comment down there, and I'll probably do a little link up at the top that'll pop up while I'm talking about this if you want to know more about that. But this is something that the FCC has been working on to reduce robocalls, and especially scam calls, spoofed calls, where you're looking at it and it looks like a local number and they're spoofing the number, or they're spoofing, it's a scam call, they're spoofing the phone number of the IRS or a bank or something like that. So the FCC has been working on this, and they have a date for this, and they're looking at, I'll read through this. So basically they were going to be providing a longer date for small VoIP providers, but they want to pull that in a little bit. The FCC today proposed and sought comment on shortening the amount of time afforded to certain small voice service providers for implementing caller ID authentication using the stir-shaken framework. It's a couple of big acronyms. So again, I explained that in that Tech Tuesday that I did a while back. New evidence indicates that a subset of small voice service providers are originating an increasing quantity of illegal robocalls. Implementation of caller ID authentication technology, specifically stir-shaken, will reduce the effectiveness of illegal spoofing and allow law enforcement to identify bad actors more easily, and help voice service providers identify calls with illegally spoofed caller ID information before those calls reach your subscribers. So one of the issues that we've had is that nobody really is tracking these calls as they go across the voice network. So that's why you can get these things, and nobody can find out who the bad actors are. So by them putting all these things in place, different voice providers are going to have to attest to the call that they either know the customer, or that they have connected with another provider that knows a customer, that kind of thing, in order to attest to these calls throughout the time from the origination to the termination. The FCC set a deadline for most large voice service providers to implement stir-shaken by June 30th, 2021, so that's coming up pretty quick. But the Commission granted small voice providers with 100,000 or fewer subscriber lines an extension until June 30th, 2023. But they're concerned now, they're today proposing shortening that by 1 year, the extension enjoyed by the small voice service providers, to implement stir-shaken in the IP portions of their networks by June 30th, 2022. And what they're saying is those smaller ones seem to be where the biggest problem is. So they don't want to give them a pass for 2 years. I guess they're going to give them a little bit longer. That's a lot of lines, 100,000. So these are not really, really small service providers. So for a lot of voice service providers, over 100,000, it's June 30th, 2021, and then under that would be then June 30th, 2022 for stir-shaken. So if you are a voice service provider, and you're not aware of that, you should check that out. Check out that Tech Tuesday that I refer to. It'll be in the comments, and I'll have a link up at the top while I'm speaking about this. Another robocall story here. FCC demands 2 companies to stop robocall campaigns. FCC sent letters to 2 companies demanding that they stop illegal robocall campaigns from being carried out on their networks. So these folks are not the robocaller companies. These are the VoIP providers that are carrying that traffic. The FCC sent cease and desist letters to Wont Solutions and Prestige DR VoIP. These are both US-based companies, warning them that if they did not take action to stop carrying the robocall campaigns on their networks, the FCC would allow other network operators to block traffic from their companies. And that is one of the things that the FCC can do if they find somebody that's a carrier that's allowing robocalls, is they can then basically, here they're going to recommend, but eventually I think it'll be almost you have to do this. Don't accept call traffic from these companies that are allowing robocalls on their network. In the letters, the FCC notes instances where Wont Solutions and Prestige had transmitted, so again, they're just transmitting robocall campaigns. The agency said Social Security Administration imposter calls and internet bill reduction calls were sent on their networks. vacation package robocalls. So on one it was vacation packages, on the other Social Security and internet bill reduction. So these are scam calls. The FCC told the two companies that it had to tell the agency how they were planning on taking steps to effectively mitigate that illegal traffic and inform them within 14 days on the steps taken to implement effective measures to prevent their customers from using their networks to make illegal calls. So this is the impact for voice service providers. So if you're a robocaller, there are big fines involved. If you're a voice service provider and you're allowing somebody to do robocalling, illegal robocalling on your network, there are fines involved, as well as this possibility that your calls won't be routed anymore. If they don't, the FCC said it would issue a notice to voice service providers in the US telling them they could block all traffic from Vault Solutions and Prestige DR VoIP networks. And once Stir Shaken goes into place, those VoIP providers are going to want to do that because they don't want to be fined or have the FCC coming after them for passing traffic that they know is from somebody that the FCC has said is a bad actor. Jessica Rosenzweig, the acting FCC chair, said in a statement, "From these new cease and desist letters to Stir Shaken implementation to large fines in our robocall mitigation database, we are going to do everything we can to protect customers or consumers from these nuisance calls. We're not going to stop until we get robocallers, spoofers, and scammers off the line." And for those of you that get all of those car warranty calls, I'm sure you're very happy about that. This was a big story. TiVo pays $18.5 million at auction to buy MobiTV. So MobiTV was really quickly announced they were going into bankruptcy, and then eventually it looked like maybe they would try to come out of that, but realized they couldn't, so they put it up for auction basically, and TiVo beat out Roku and Amino to get that. TiVo's acquisition must be first approved by the Delaware court overseeing MobiTV's Chapter 11 restructuring. MobiTV provides turnkey app-based video distribution technology to small and mid-sized pay TV operators, mainly cable companies, with clients ranging from bigger concerns, including T-Mobile and Cable One, to the tiny cable operators represented by the NCTC. So MobiTV, basically their business model was if you are a cable provider, for example, and you want to have all of your own head-end equipment, you could use their cloud-based head-end technology to provide an IPTV service, so you could switch from your old pay TV to IPTV, not have to get all of the equipment that you need. But their business model didn't work. They weren't getting all of their costs covered. They didn't have any minimums in place. So they basically, you can see here, they entered bankruptcy in early March, reporting liabilities of $79 million versus only $19 million in assets. That's pretty interesting. They have $19 million in assets, and the price was $18.5 million to buy them. So TiVo got a good deal. TiVo was purchased nearly 2 years ago by Xperi, I guess, in a deal valued at $3 million. So TiVo was acquired fairly recently. In a statement released following the successful winning bid, Xperi said, MobiTV provides an attractive extension of TiVo's IPTV pay TV service offerings by adding managed services with the ability to reduce deployment time and onboarding costs. So this lets them now get into that business of helping others provide video service, and it also would help them with maybe content. MobiTV will help increase TiVo's IPTV penetration with US pay TV operators, enabling the rapidly launch of branded, fully featured app-based pay TV service. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the pricing. For all these people that have MobiTV now, all of the different operators. T-Mobile, by the way, so they were launching TVision, and that was going to be their TV product and was based around MobiTV. So they were using MobiTV service to do that. And when MobiTV decided they were going bankrupt, T-Mobile gave them a loan to try to help, but that didn't work out, and they basically T-Mobile decided to scuttle that whole project. So T-Mobile is going to be doing a resale now of YouTube TV and Philo TV rather than doing their own service that was done by MobiTV. So T-Mobile is no longer a MobiTV customer. It'll be interesting to see what happens with some of these others because, again, it was not a business model that was making money. So it'll be interesting to see if TiVo needs to raise the prices to the customers that they currently have, or if they need to deploy or implement minimums for those that signed on that never really moved a lot of customers over, or what they're going to do there. Maybe they'll just start from scratch. We'll have to see. AT&T and Discovery merge media assets, forming a TV giant. This is another big story. So AT&T, which owns HBO Max, they own CNN, I believe, so they were already in the media business, is merging those media assets with Discovery, and they're spinning that off. So it says here, AT&T and Discovery said they reached a definitive agreement to combine AT&T's Warner Media, which again, that's Warner Media. I even forgot about that. So in addition to HBO Max, they've got Warner Media, which is all of the movies that are coming out that Warner Media produces, with Discovery, creating what they called a TV and streaming giant. The deal would unwind AT&T's strategy of combining its mobile phone and broadband assets with a content company. So AT&T has been looking at focusing more on the core broadband business. They just recently kind of shifted DirecTV off to a separate operating company to get that off their books, and now they're doing something similar with Warner Media, and again, this is going to include HBO Max, and I'm assuming the other content that they have. Discovery CEO David Zlazov, who's been touting Discovery's unique place in the media world, will be the head of the combined company, which will own streamed assets in HBO Max and Discovery Plus and a collection of cable networks, including CNN, TBS and TNT Cartoon Network, HGTV Food Network, Discovery, TLC, and OWN. So this is a significant media company now, and AT&T will still have a hand in this. This agreement unites two entertainment leaders with complementary content, strengths, and positions the new company to be one of the leading global direct-to-consumer streaming platforms. For AT&T shareholders, this is an opportunity to unlock value and be one of the best capitalized broadband companies focused on investing in 5G and fiber to meet substantial long-term demand for connectivity. The new company would aim to take on the leaders in the new streaming TV market, now led by Netflix and the Walt Disney Company, or Disney Plus. So again, AT&T is looking at their core business. Originally they thought, well, we're going to go into 5G and it would be good to have that service plus be able to offer video content over that, kind of a sticky kind of offering, bundle offering. Similar to what T-Mobile was doing with T-Vision, which again, T-Mobile has scuttled that, but they're going to be doing a resale play. And T-Mobile does not have the, they don't have the content that AT&T had. So AT&T is basically going to be focusing on the broadband portion, but they still, like I say, they still have a hand in that with the having a percentage ownership in that, a stake in that. And this, following on this, it sounds like Amazon may be acquiring MGM. So, you know, this past thing I was talking about with AT&T and spinning off and Discovery and HBO Max and this big media company. So now Amazon is trying to figure out what it's going to do, and they were probably talking about this, but now the news is coming out that they may actually do this as soon as this week. Amazon, or maybe next week, Amazon deal to acquire MGM to come as soon as Tuesday. It actually might be announced this week. Amazon is in talks to pay almost $9 billion for the business. The agreement would bring a vast library of movies and shows to Amazon, which operates the Prime Video streaming service. MGM's catalog includes the James Bond, Pink Panther, RoboCop, Rocky franchises, as well as films such as The Silence of the Lambs. The acquisition could raise Amazon.com's streaming profile by adding a mountain of proprietary content, strengthening the reach and value of its Prime offering. The deal would be Amazon's second biggest after Whole Foods. So, you know, Amazon, if you get Amazon Prime, then you automatically get their video service. So they have, they're in the 100 plus million what you would call Prime customers, and how many of those use streaming, we don't know. I don't know anyway. So it could be a lot of people just use it for the shipping, maybe music, but the streaming comes along with that. So as I've said before, content is kind of king if you're going to be a streaming company. So this deal between Discovery and Time Warner Media and CNN and everything else that brings with it, and this one here with Amazon and MGM, it's all about content and getting more and more content. Because if you're going to be successful in the over-the-top stream business, you know, and keep those customers on an ongoing basis, they need fresh content all the time. Of course, you know, that can also, as we'll see here in a minute, that can also be an issue as you get more streaming companies in the business. Top pay TV operators lost nearly 1.9 million customers in Q1. So this is on the cord cutting side. Cord cutting was roughly flat with the horrific losses experienced in the first quarter of 2020. So lots of cord cutting the last couple of years. The top 13 operators in the U.S. pay TV ecosystem collectively shed over 1.895 million subscribers in the first quarter, just slightly less than the 2+ million customers that went missing in Q1 2020. So it's very close to what they lost in 2020. AT&T didn't lose quite as much. That cord cutting from Comcast got a little worse. So cord cutting continues. And again, this is due a lot to streaming. But streaming isn't necessarily safe either. Post-pandemic, consumers might drop TV subscriptions. During the pandemic, Americans loaded up on streaming services, but as the country enters a post-COVID era, consumers are looking to spend less on TV, according to the study by Antennas Direct. Now, this is a company that makes antennas for people to be able to get content, right out of the air. 2 in 5 saying they had to limit spending elsewhere to afford their TV subscriptions, and 4 in 5 conceding they'll need to cut back to pay unaddressed bills or household utility costs. So during the pandemic, people were adding streaming services because they were home and they needed more entertainment. So people now are looking back at it and saying, maybe I'm spending too much. Only half of those who studied said they will keep all their TV services post-COVID, while 1 in 3 already have plans to cut cable. That could be more cord cutting, or streaming services. And 2 in 5 plan to cut more than one type of service. Even while they were stuck at home, 1 in 5 Americans primarily used a mobile device or laptop to watch TV, and 1 in 4 plan to watch TV even more TV on their mobile devices post-COVID. Cord cutting should be about creating low-cost, flexible access to TV programming. As the streaming competition intensifies and cable providers try to keep up, consumers are falling victim to overspending to access news and entertainment content. So again, what they're saying here is that people are starting to realize how much they're paying, and it's supposed to be low cost, but when you start to look at all of the different things that you're paying for, it can add up. And again, this company makes antennas, so their point is if you want local content and good amount of entertainment, right over the air, you can get one of their antennas and pull it out of the air the way we used to. Remember when we all had antennas on top of the house? Verizon Media, in a Publicis study, calls AVOD a growing ad opportunity. So as people start to get subscription fatigue, looking at all of the $10 charges, $15 charges that they're paying for different streaming services for this different content, they're saying that AVOD, which is ad-supported video on demand, is a growing ad opportunity. Frustration with SVOD driving will drive viewers to AVOD. Driving will drive, that's a typo. So frustration with SVOD is driving people to AVOD. While more people are streaming overall, frustration with subscription-based services, many of which are ad-free, is likely to drive viewers to AVOD. So if you're on Netflix, you're not having to watch any ads, but if you're willing to watch some ads, you can cut your costs quite a bit. Streaming subscriptions grew 48% in the fourth quarter of 2020 compared to the third quarter. While 71% of consumers point to premium SVOD as their current go-to service, the survey said subscription fatigue and overload is pushing cost-conscious consumers from SVOD to AVOD. So from subscription, where you have no ads and you pay per month, to AVOD. AVOD, there quite often is a cost anyway, where you've got to pay a cost, but it's supported by ads, so it's maybe a little bit less expensive. In fact, a lot of OTT services now are starting to add that as a tier, so you'll have an ad-free, like Discovery Plus is this way, so you'll have an ad-free service that I can't remember the prices, but might be $10 a month, and then maybe an ad-supported service might be $5 a month for the same channels, but you have to deal with ads. Streamers are using an average of 5 streaming services, but they're not necessarily happy because watching TV has become complicated. You got different apps, and you're like, what do I do here? Or you can have a Roku, but it's still not as easy as an old set-top box. In a survey, 76% of consumers said no one streaming service has it all. 45% said they were using too many services for TV content, and 48% of streamers worry about how much they're spending on these services and are sharing passwords to help manage expenses. So there's a couple of things in there to unpack. Yeah, it's complicated, and no one service has it all, and that's one of the things that's driving so many different streaming services, or people to get so many different services. You might want to watch a show that's only on Disney Plus, another thing that's only on HBO Max, another thing that's only on Discovery, another thing that's only on Amazon. That's one of the reasons why these streaming companies are trying to get original content that they produce, or content that is exclusive to them, like maybe The Office or Friends or something like that, where only they're going to have it. Stranger Things, for a premium service that Netflix developed. Survey found that 3 in 5 TV viewers, actually, let me go back to there. So 45% they were using too many services, and 48% worry about how much they're spending. So those are the other things. Again, as you get all of these services, you cut the cord on your cable to reduce costs, and now you're finding that you're starting to creep up to the same price you were paying before. Survey found that 3 in 5 TV viewers were more aware of AVOD than they were a few years ago. More than half said they were interested in ad-supported services. I have to say that if you watch it without ads, if you watch something on Discovery Plus without ads, and then you go to it with ads, it is nice not having ads. So I always try to, if I'm watching something on regular TV, I try to watch it recorded so I can buzz through all those things. Among those using unpaid ad-free streaming services, 83% said they were willing to try an ad-supported service to save money. When asked why they're looking at AVOD, 45% of viewers said the service is free. Not always. So why not try it? And 43% said the AVOD they tried was good quality for a free service. Content was a smaller factor in avoiding more fees. Just 23% said the AVOD services they looked at feature really high quality shows and movies. So again, content is important if you're going to charge a subscription fee. You have to have good content, and you have to keep providing that content. As people get tired of shows, or they binge watch something and then suddenly that's something they've watched, you got to keep priming that content pump. Now it says here AVOD is free. Again, there's more that are coming out now that are free, where it's like the old over-the-air TV. You turn it on, you watch the commercials, you don't have to pay anything. So more consumers are probably going to be supplementing their video with that kind of AVOD. There's a new acronym for that called FAST, I think, Free Ad-Supported TV, I believe is what it's FAST. So that's completely free versus AVOD, which is ad-supported video on demand. So that's not usually free. So that's what's happening today in broadband. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, give me a thumbs up on the video. And if you would subscribe to our channel if you're not already, click the little bell. You'll be notified when I am live. I'm live almost every Tuesday. Next Tuesday, Tech Tuesday, is taking a holiday for Memorial Day, so I will not be here next Tuesday, but I will see you the week after that. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.